Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on, the Wurundjeri people, and their elders and our elders, past, present, and emerging. I would like to also acknowledge any multicultural elders either watching us today or joining us today, and their contribution to this country and to this land and its voters. And above all, a very happy Cultural Diversity Week to everybody. Really excited about it. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth am I doing here? Well, this is me, Rida Aleem Khan, a multicultural ambassador of Blue Knot Foundation. That's why I've got my blue knot with my hijab today. Blue Knot Foundation is basically an organization that supports adult survivors of complex trauma and has been a leading organization at a federal level across different states and territories of Australia that highlights issues such as the child sexual abuse in the community, as well as other issues related to complex trauma. I believe it's very important that we have a Blue Knot Foundation as part of the Australian fabric, because at the end of the day, you want multicultural communities and new and emerging communities to be aware of the resources out there to support them and to see how we can support them. So joining us today is Judy Tang, who is our Victorian Multicultural Commissioner. We have Jude, and he's the CEO of GYMHA, Global Youth Mental Health Awareness. We have Cathy Kezelman, who is the CEO of Blue Knot Foundation. And today we are indeed doing a fundraiser for Blue Knot Foundation. So we do hope that you guys are going to be generous. It is part of my charity pageant, Miss Diamond Australia International 2021, the first hijabi to actually enter a charity pageant. So fingers crossed, see how I go, and handing over to you, Cathy, to introduce yourself, and then I'll go around the group.
Thanks so much, Rita, and delighted to be here today during Cultural Diversity Week. As Rita said, I'm president of Blue Knot Foundation, and we're a national organisation that works to empower people who've had experiences of violence, abuse, neglect in childhood, as a young person or as an adult, and we call that complex trauma. We call it complex trauma because it happens, unfortunately, many times and over time, and it can affect a person's life in all sorts of ways. It sadly occurs in every culture, in every society. It doesn't know about religion and gender and sexual preference. It's not a comfortable topic, but not talking about it doesn't make it go away. In fact, the silence and secrecy around violence and abuse in the home, the family, the neighbourhood, workplaces, services, can mean it goes on for longer. It can also mean that people experiencing it feel even more alone. So that's why we're delighted to be working with Rita when she reached out to us. We've been plugging away as an organisation since 1995, and really important to be reaching out to multicultural communities as well. We know that, in lots of communities, victims have been ostracised and marginalised and often punished and blamed for being victims. And we need to change that. We saw in the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse that many people very courageously came forward and just spoke about how hard it was to be heard, to be listened to, and to be believed. And that crosses a whole lot of different communities. And we saw that in 4,000 of our institutions in Australia. We know there are a lot of myths around abuse and violence. We know that, some people are not believed, but we also know that it's very, very rare for people to make up false stories about being abused, about being neglected. There are lots of misconceptions, and, we've been working away to tackle some of those over time, and we're just really keen now to speak with all of you today and to just really explore how we can reach out into other communities, into multicultural communities, and start to, break some of the barriers down, and we're here to learn from you. We're experts around complex trauma, but we're really keen to build our cultural sensitivities and capacity to really partner with you so that we can understand how to, break some of the stigma and raise awareness within other communities. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for that, Cathy. It's I love that part about collaboration with the multicultural community. So not speaking for them, but speaking with them. That insight is extremely important. Moving further, I would like to introduce Dr. Judy Tang, who is our Victorian Multicultural Commissioner and is also the president of Australian GLBT Multicultural Council, AGMC. So, hi, Judy. Would you like to share anything about yourself today and how you're feeling? How you doing
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you so much to Cathy and yourself, Rida, for inviting me to this. And I really hope that today I'm able to share whatever knowledge you can sort of get and learn, I assume, from what we can sort of find out today as well. Yes, I am a commissioner at the Victorian Multicultural Commission, and our role is to act like, in many ways, in simpler language, as the intermediary, the messenger between multicultural communities and state government and so forth. I was the president of AGMC. I've actually moved across. So my role now is I'm a board director at the Victorian Pride Centre, which will be opening in May. And it's probably, as far as I know, it's the only LGBTIQ centre in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's a big thing. So look out for that. And my day job, the one that pays the bills, is I'm a clinical neuropsychologist. So I provide a lot of assessments and understandings around people with brain changes and how that impacts on their thinking. And we certainly do come across and assess and try to work and support our way through for people who have suffered or continue to suffer from complex trauma, and how that impacts a lot of their decision-making skills and thinking and so forth. So certainly it's a huge area and interest of mine to ensure that especially multicultural communities receive accessible and appropriate support. And that's me.
That's so amazing, Judy. I don't know how you do all that and still manage to sleep and, look good like the way you do today. That's awesome. Now we're moving towards Jude, and Jude is my brother from another mother, CEO of Jimha Global Youth Mental Health Awareness. And Jude has done so much for African youths, not just in Australia, but across the globe. And I would really like to learn more about your work. And so please share with us, Jude, what keeps you busy these days and how you're doing.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Especially, thank you to Rida for this opportunity. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owner, custodian of the land that I'm presenting from. I pay my respect to the elders, the past and the present, and the emerging as well. I also extend this respect to the Aboriginal and the Torres Islanders that might be listening to us today or might be presenting as well with us today. It is a great honor and a privilege to be among these inspiring leaders in our community, to share the little work that I'm doing in the community and also on a global scale. My name is Jude, Eadie. I migrated to Australia about 12 years ago now, originally from Nigeria. And it's, as much as I try to say I'm Australian, people keep asking me, where are you from? And it's very important for me to know that culture is a part of my life, it's my identity. And that's why I was so delighted when I received this invitation. As Rida rightly said, I'm the CEO and the founder of the Global Youth Mental Health Awareness. We provide mental health services for the young people across Australia and also outside Australia as well. My role as the CEO is to facilitate the daily operations of the organizations. I collaborate with the different stakeholders, different community group. Collaboration is a core part of our business. So I ensure that we have mutual collaboration. We collaborate with like-minded people. The important part of our work is that we provide a safe environment for the young people to express themselves. So that is very important. And again, look, what we try to do at the Global Youth Mental Health Awareness Authority is a not-for-profit. So it's a company limited by guarantee that whosoever become a part of GMHA automatically become the part of the owner of GMHA. So my role, I would say I specialize in delivering the global youth events in different countries where I deliver successfully in different up to about 8 countries at the moment, both visual and the physical gathering as well. I provide online and telephone counseling for the young people and support them in terms of building their capacity as well. So it's a great honor and a privilege, and as we go on, I'll be able to share more about what we're doing at the Global Youth Mental Health Awareness. Thank you again to Rida, Cathy, and all the people that have worked behind the scene to provide this opportunity for we to share.
So thank you so much for that, Jude. We'll move on to a bit of a lighter question, which is about the significance of Cultural Diversity Week for each of you. And so I'll start again with Jude and then move on to Judy and Cathy. You mentioned about culture, significance of being part of this country, how you as a Nigerian get asked where you're from, even though you've been in Australia for a very long time. So why do you think it's important that we continue to signify Cultural Diversity Week in Australia and still continue to do our welfare work, that is promoting mental health awareness? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rida, and happy Cultural Diversity Week to everyone here and to all those that are listening to us today. What a beautiful day, to share about the cultural diversity. As I mentioned from the beginning, culture is my identity. So seeing this opportunity for we to celebrate the cultural awareness, I think is very, very important. Let's start with the definition of the cultural diversity. When we talk about culture, normally it's a part or a way of life. So when we talk about diversity, we are referring to variety. So we have, people, different people, and the way they live their lives. So automatically, when you take culture away from people, you take their belief away from them, you are automatically or indirectly destroying them. So it becomes so important for we to discuss about it. I also acknowledge the unconscious bias relating to all these things, which are very, very crucial. The more we talk about it, the more we provide the awareness, the more people come to understand it and it go into their consciousness. So which is very, very important. And this helps us in different ways as well to dispel stereotypes. So, for example, I have heard about what happened with African gangs, some time ago. There are a lot of things, that's going on in our lives. I was telling people last time, look, Africa comprises of 54 different countries. So I would say the incompetencies of a few group of people cannot be generalized for the whole country. So, this helps us to avoid those kind of, racial discrimination and all of those things. So let's go back again to look at it. When you talk about cultural diversity, you're talking about people that are bringing different ideas together. So that gives us opportunity to be more creative, to be more innovative. And I think we need this in our society today. And I look at it that is the only way, that we can grow, having a variety of perspective, different perspective coming on board. I also believe that we are all unique in our own individual ways. So it's okay to be different. So we have that opportunity to work together. So when you talk about the cultural diversity. So it is also a way for people to celebrate, or for all of us to celebrate, our diversity and build up also our resiliences. I know most of us that have migrated here, we have passed through so many things in terms of assimilation and all of those things. So we look at it as an opportunity. I look at it as an opportunity for us to celebrate those strengths, those resiliencies that we have actually portrayed throughout the time. So one of my favorite quote was from Anonymous anyway. So diversity is one of the two things that we have in common, and we need to celebrate it every day. Thank you, Rida and everyone, for this opportunity.
No worries, Jude. That is beautiful, being united in diversity, and that is the significance, and that is actually our strength at the end of the day. That is amazing. Now, to you, Judy, how would you see? What's the cultural? What's the significance of Cultural Diversity Week for you as a Victorian Multicultural Commissioner, especially?
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually second a lot of Jude's sentiments. I was born in Australia. My parents were refugees from the Vietnam War, and growing up in Australia back then, I'm showing my age, there just wasn't much visibility of multicultural communities or different colored people and different cultures. So it actually felt a little bit lonely growing up. My only saving grace in many ways was I went to a very culturally diverse primary school. So I grew up and, even though I was the only Asian girl in primary school, I had Lebanese friends, Greek friends, there was a very Italian friends. And that's how, that was my foray into it. But otherwise, things like reading the newspaper or watching TV at that time, there was none of that visibility. So having something as important as Cultural Diversity Week, first and foremost, it just provides visibility, and even more importantly, I believe, positive visibility for all the different cultures. And that's what I love about it. As a commissioner, I also think it's wonderful that we can bring together and showcase and not, show the visibility of all the different cultures, but allows, all the different cultures to get to know each other and sample everything. I just think that's really exciting and a wonderful thing to do. And that really sort of falls into, our passion and shared values of social cohesion for Victoria, but if not Australia-wide. So for me, it's a huge thing, Cultural Diversity Week, because it means that we have visibility and we can really get to know each other a bit better, which then just promotes more diversity and understanding moving forward.
That is wonderful, Judy, especially that notion of positive visibility that really resonates with me as well. Growing up being a Muslim, like all I got was just negative visibility of Muslim community. Yeah. So having a positive visibility is extremely important. And what Jude and Judy are both really saying to our audience, I guess, is to use this Cultural Diversity Week as an opportunity to collaborate and to dialogue and reclaim that positive visibility and your contribution that clearly you have in this country. Now,
nicely said. I couldn't even said it any better than that. That's perfect.
Thanks, Judy. Thank you so much. Moving towards Cathy. So what's the significance of Cultural Diversity Week for you?
Look, I think, Australia always talks about being a multicultural society, and I think it's something that we can take for granted. And I think we can forget to actually really understand what that means in terms of the richness of the different cultural influences and people who have come to Australia. And, how we really do explore, as you said, Jude, those unconscious biases and the stereotypes and move beyond that to see the human beings, the individuals and the different groups of people who have joined, Australia and made it into the land, hopefully it is, and more so that it needs to become as well, in terms of, real tolerance, real inclusion and real celebration and understanding. I mean, my one of my parents was Australian, another one came from Eastern Europe following the Holocaust. And I really struggled for a long time with the sense of identity for all sorts of reasons. And I think, we all need to understand where we come from so we can understand who we are and try and make sense of where we're going. And I think understanding culture and background is a real part of that for each of us. And so, yeah, let's all work together and explore, what we can all learn from one another, because there's just so much we need to know.
Perfectly said, perfectly said, Cathy. I think that I love the storytelling throughout all of you guys, how you're all sharing your migration experience or your Australian experience with us and the audience today, because at the end of the day, storytelling is extremely powerful. And speaking of that, my question would be towards Cathy, that what is the understanding of complex trauma from the perspective of Blue Knot Foundation? And I will later navigate this conversation towards how do we then translate the understanding of complex trauma to multicultural communities. So how do you at Blue Knot Foundation understand complex trauma as, Cathy?
Yeah, complex trauma, the term has developed because there's been such a misunderstanding about what trauma is. And a lot of people think about the trauma of, as we're experiencing now, of floods, bushfires, an accident, and not to minimize anyone's trauma. It's highly significant. But what we mean by complex trauma is when someone's experienced repeated, often ongoing, often extreme trauma over time, often perpetrated. It's usually perpetrated by another human being, and it's often perpetrated by someone who's in a position of trust, someone you should be able to depend on. And particularly, when this happens when you're a child and it's a parent or a caregiver or someone in your extended family, that has a profound impact because it's someone you both depend on, but someone who's harming you. And so how does a child actually make sense of that? And when a child doesn't have someone who they can go to, who helps them to feel safe and actually process that, that can have a profound impact going on right through life. So people who experience complex trauma don't always experience repeated trauma in childhood. It can be as a young person, as an adult, or, over time, at different periods of time. But it's about understanding how that sort of trauma, that sort of violence, exploitation, abuse, neglect can actually impact your core sense of who you are and your sense of how you relate to yourself, which is primary, but also to other people, to the world, and how you can actually ever trust again. And I think there's a real lack of understanding about, just how profound that impact can be. But what's very, very important is to say that people can and do heal and recover, and that's not just, being Pollyanna. We know from neuroscience, and Judy, you could definitely speak to this, and we know from the stories that you spoke about, Rida, that people, can find a way through the trauma, but what it takes is, really good support and the support of other human beings, just as people have been harmed in relationships, so people can heal in relationship. And we should never underestimate the power of even the most simple of connections to actually reframe that lack of trust and show that people aren't always dangerous. In fact, many people are very safe and very supportive. So how can we all work together to help people find that path to recovery and healing?
That is wonderful, Cathy. That really, even like just listening to that helps me gain clarity, because yeah, you're right. When I heard about trauma, it's like, oh, there's like short-term trauma, or there's like acute trauma, or there is long-term trauma, and then there's complex trauma. So understanding the difference between each and trying to understand what kind of support I need as per the intensity of my trauma is a decision that I decide as an individual. Judy, would you like to add, how will this then get translated? Like, imagine like we have a bunch of people in the multicultural community and we need to explain complex trauma to them. How do you think we should go about it?
Good question, eh? How do we go? I feel that I've noticed, and I feel like a lot of communities appreciate it, is we extend ourselves out there and share stories. You were talking about sharing stories before, and that has the greatest impact and understanding across all cultures, really, by providing opportunities for people to share their stories. Allows others, especially those within the other multicultural communities, to then understand and ask questions, which then helps with their learning. So I feel sharing stories is the best way to go about it, and that can be done online or in person or in any other media form. So there's that. That answers your question. But you know, going on for what Cathy also said, I'm very keen to highlight that complex trauma in many ways, to be mindful that it can impact on the experience of complex trauma. Sorry, let me rephrase. Someone who comes from a multicultural background in Australia, their experience of complex trauma might be exacerbated or compounded in some ways through just the systemic barriers or the societal barriers that they may face in their younger years or formative years or growth or during that traumatic time. But also be mindful that in the recovery process, because those structural barriers, those systemic barriers and prejudices that are pervasive in pockets of society can also hinder their recovery process. So for me, that's something that I just wanted to, you know, highlight and have a discussion around, I suppose, because I understand if we have a lot of professionals that want to understand how to work with multicultural individuals and communities, that's already the first thing to consider.
Definitely. I think this is a identified gap which we need to overcome with collaboration with various multicultural and health and mental health organizations across this country, because only a group level, team level effort can really bring about a positive change in supporting the survivors who has the potential of probably already contributing a lot to our society, but we're just not aware of how to really support them in the best way possible. Something that Jude mentioned earlier was about feeling, at some point, feeling lonely and isolated. And then Cathy mentioned that to heal from complex trauma, you need a support, and there is a lot of support for people like that. So Jude, I would like to come back to you and just help me understand that as a Nigerian Australian, as a man, someone who, you know, who have a history in terms of working with, working in mental health, how do you think that, how can we translate complex trauma not only to our multicultural communities, but to our multicultural young adults in this country?
Oh, thank you so much, Rida. I want to thank Judy and Cathy for that explanation, that contribution. I'll probably start from Cathy, and then I'll come back later on to your question, Rida. You know, I love the way you explain the complex trauma. There's something that is very important, that most of the people that experience, you know, trauma, they don't want to share. It's very difficult for them to share, you know, and that comes from what you mentioned, a relationship. You know, a few days ago, I did mention about relationship in one of our events. It's a key, one of the key in building a community. But I know the question that comes into that again is that trust. You know, with a relationship comes with trust. So how can we trust people? You know, and becomes so difficult. And I'll come back again to what you mentioned, which it would really struck me so much, was that, in the midst of trusting no one, you still have to trust someone for you to succeed in life. There is no man that is an island. So we all need each other to grow. I'll share a story with you. There was someone that was going through a tough time in her life, and she booked an appointment to see me or have a chat with me. And she came in with so many things. And then one of the questions I just asked her, what would you like to discuss? After going around, and then she mentioned about the trauma. And you know what she told me? She said, Jude, I have never shared this with anyone in my life. Immediately she finished sharing it, that was her healing process. She regained herself back, and then she was able to move on in life. And there was one thing that she shared with me, Jude, before this time, that's why I was still living, but I feel like I was a dead person, because she was keeping it in her mind. She didn't want to let it go. She didn't want to release it. So it's very important for people to talk about it with the people that they trust, and then they regain themselves back. That was very important. And then going back to what Dr. Judy mentioned about multicultural community, I remember when I was formerly the regional advisor for the North and West, the Victorian Multicultural Commission, we were always having the community consultation or regional consultation. And that was where I learned a lot from different people that comes with different perspectives, with a different culture. And that was what Cathy mentioned from the beginning. It's about learning, understanding, and it gives me an opportunity to learn the culture of other people. And if we don't understand this culture of the culture of other people, it becomes almost difficult or impossible for we to build the relationship with them. So I believe for the multicultural community, we need to do a lot of consultation, a lot of gathering, providing awareness about mental health. And you won't believe it. The first time we did the Global Youth Mental Health Awareness inauguration in Australia here, I couldn't believe it how many people that started sharing on the Facebook online that they never knew about mental health. You might be thinking it's a developed country, but believe me, there's still a lot of people that don't know anything about mental health. They don't know the difference between the mental health and the mental illness. So I believe providing awareness, and understanding, of course, Cathy mentioned that, and Judy also, also mentioned that as well. Community or society understanding and support is very, very crucial towards the recovery for people that are suffering from mental illness. That is why we need to provide more awareness, educate the community, and this can happen through the gathering, community collaboration, and also Victoria have initiated or incorporated into their curriculum intercultural learning, so which is very important. We need to learn other people's culture, bring different ideas, innovation on board in order to build a sustainable and a secure community.
That is excellent, Jude. So integrating cultural world cultures into Victorian or Australian education curriculum would be part of the healing from those experiencing systematic, as Judy mentioned about the systematic barriers such as racism, such as sexism, such as ageism in our community, or socioeconomic barriers that our communities face, such as coming from rural Australia. I myself come from rural Victoria, so certainly that sense of isolation and that lack of support is there. And also I've seen that one of the ways people, when they don't know how to heal themselves, what we end up practicing is distraction. So I might just binge watch Netflix. I might just, not want to talk about it. I just, indulge myself in substance abuse of some kind because I just want to escape the thought of it.
And that's the thing with racism then, because then the person, instead of realizing, oh, they're going through trauma or complex trauma, it's like, oh, this is obviously indicative of all Asian people, for example, you know, clearly they are like this. And it's like, well, no, that's not how it works. You know, you can't ascribe certain negative stereotypes to some groups and not to others. And you know, that's just an example. That's a perfect example of a potential barrier that you know people might be faced with.
To me, it's about breaking down the them and us, you know, there's this group of people that may be mentally unwell or may have experienced trauma and we're all okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And not understanding that, you know, we're all human beings. We can all be vulnerable, and actually being vulnerable is a strength. Exactly. And so if we can all be there for one another to, you know, and it's about, you know, how people can respond to those stories and respond to disclosure, because obviously that is absolutely critical. And that's a process around education, awareness, so that, you know, we can actually just remove that judgment and remove the punishment and just say, this is a person who along life's journey has experienced this series of things. And obviously people coming, you know, from different communities have whole lots of other stories as well.
Yeah.
We don't need to know what the detail is, but to understand that they're human beings who are responding to what's happened to them. And let's understand that rather than labeling it, and be there to help support.
That's right. And another great point that Jude mentioned was to be able to differentiate between mental illness and mental health. That we are constantly living in a society where there's an over advertisement of you have a little bit of an issue, you are mentally ill. Let's not try to self-diagnose, or let's not try to go on Google and assume that we've got something very serious unless it's you know, verified by a medical expert or a mental health expert. And I think Blue Dot Foundation actually has a whole book on complex trauma, and that can help service providers as well as people in mental health practice or in the health department, just so they can learn a bit more about complex trauma and gain clarity and tools around it. So certainly there is the stereotyping. How much, Cathy, what do you think about the role of media in all of this, in perpetuating certain narratives in the community?
Look, I mean, media these days is pretty challenging, because obviously we have a, you know, 24/7 media cycle where you can't differentiate between opinion, fact, you know, false news. And there's a whole lot of different agendas happening, you know, often highly political. So media is a very fraught area. So there is a lot of responsible media who is hopefully being educative. Then there is the sensationalist media who, you know, wants to get the story, and it doesn't matter at what cost.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's an ongoing exercise to, inform the media as well, you know, to really help them understand, you know, how to work with responsibly with people's stories, because we need to honor them. You know, people's stories are just so precious. And we find with Blue Knot, you know, we have different media outlets coming to us and, you know, defining what story they want to hear and what part of the story. And that's obviously very, very difficult for people, because they're not just this piece of their story, they're the whole journey. So how do we, you know, honor people's stories and represent them in a way that, you know, is helpful and supportive to others, doesn't shy away from the reality, but doesn't traumatize other people as well, but then provide the tools, you know, along with the stories to support the healing processes we're talking about.
That's right. I felt that as well as a woman of color growing up here. I feel like they always wanted Muslim woman victim stories and not the stories of us celebrating and healing and empowering each other and the communities around us. Jude earlier mentioned about African gang issue and the stereotype that came, and the trauma, of course, it caused onto the young people in the African community. While at the same time we're living, it's like one of the things that I noticed is it's been 2 years since the Christchurch attack, and the loss of 51 Muslim lives. And yet I don't see anyone highlighting that or remembering that or wanting to remember that. And sometimes that kind of selective compassion and amnesia actually further traumatizes the community. Instead of highlighting it and talking about, let's heal through this and let's work on and move on together with this, what we like to do is we want to talk about victim stories and how the mainstream protagonist, who's an Australian white person, is a hero saving everybody, but we don't want to hear it the other way around. Multicultural people saving and helping heal other cultures in this community through their culture, through their medicine, through their poems and storytelling and art. And so, Jude, I was just trying to wanting to hear your perspective on that. Do you think that art and multicultural art in particular plays a very important role as part of healing from complex trauma?
Thank Rida again for that question. So I believe that the more we talk about this, the more people get to be aware. And yeah, so you never know what people are passing through until they share their story with you. And sometimes you think that your story, what you're passing through, your challenges is the worst on earth, that the world have come to an end. You have nothing to, contribute to the world anymore. But when people share their story, with you, realize that your problem is not even up to the extent or half of what other people are experiencing. So, of course, life is full of challenges. Life is not a bed of roses. We experience suffering, and it's a part of life. So, in them sharing the story is what helps people a lot in a different ways. They look at the strength, they look at the way you're able to, cultivate yourself, to overcome those sufferings, and it gives them the ability that if you can do it, they themselves they can do it. In the gym, we have the model we're using. It has 4 components. So the first part of the component is what we call the mentoring. So, and that's very crucial. Then the second part of it is about collaboration and partnership, and the third part of it is evidence-based, and the fourth part of it is a peer group, or we call it a gym hack crew. So what that means is that we give opportunity for the young people to form a group or to pair with one another to share their experience, to support one another. And when they are together, they feel more, more opportunity. They have that kind of, okay, in the same age like me, I can share, and they understand each other much better. So, and they feel more confident to share their experience. And one of the biggest issues that we have across the globe in terms of young people not sharing their mentor is because of the shame, the stigma, and the labeling. It doesn't matter which culture you belong to or any part of the globe that you are. So those 3 things, prevent people from not discussing their mental, especially the difficult emotions. So when people now get together, they pay together in a group or have that peer support group, they will be more open to share their experiences. And remember, the problem share is half solved. I definitely believe on that, because from talking therapy, I call it, I realize how many people they're able to heal so rapidly. So it's very important for you to provide a safe environment for the young people to discuss about their mental health. And the more we provide those opportunities for the young people, the more they discuss their mental illnesses, and the more it is we find out in terms of suicide. Because people lock up, as you mentioned, Rida, they hide it. And many people want to actually, escape from it or try to avoid it. That's where people go into denial, that it doesn't happen, it's not happening to me. So they find it difficult to accept it, and then they try to avoid it by taking alcohol, drug, all those things to suppress it, their emotion, and all of those things. But by the time they find someone that they trust, they share those emotions with, and that can become a part of their healing process. And as they will tell you, they will look, I feel more relief. That's why I feel more relief because of sharing this with you. And that comes again to the community understanding and ability to listen, active listening is very, very important. And when you look at it from our community consultation and interview with the young people that we have done in different settings, in different groups, we realize that, look, most of all these young people, they don't even need medication. I'm not disputing the efficacy of medication, but just giving them the opportunity to share their experience with you, alone is a huge part of their healing process. I think we need to do more in those areas.
Definitely, Jude. I totally hear you on this. There's several points there. One is regarding not assuming that everyone's going to heal through counseling. It may work for one person, it may not work for another. As you mentioned, some people may heal through sports and physical activity. Other people may use community welfare programs, feeding the homeless people initiative, or my new neighbor campaign we have in Victoria, just knocking on the door of your neighbor and just saying hello to check on them. And then there is also our cultures and religions playing a very important part in terms of prayer and healing rituals with the land and the nature around us. And finally, I have to say something and that resonates with me today. Both Cathy and Jude, I see you both as an elder of a multicultural community. And I love the fact that you have been brave enough to come forward and address issues that I felt probably were not really identified back in your day when you were, years later when you were there. And while I understand that social media is something that young adults out there are using, and I do have to admit that sometimes the trigger of complex trauma is from social media and the cyberbullying that happens to various, not just young people, but to all adults. Even you could be any random person online and you could just be having a normal day and then bam, someone says something and that's it. That's it. It's a trigger point. So speaking of all this and having this dialogue, Cathy, I would definitely like you to tell me more about the importance of language and translation for multicultural communities when we are attempting to create resources regarding complex trauma for them, and how important it is to start translating the language. And it may not just be language in terms of translating in different cultural languages, but also the language of art and the language of visual communication, because we also have people with disability who may not be able to see or may require sign language and multicultural language to be able to understand, access resources of complex trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be guided by all of you, but I suppose it's also the language of culture. So the language of individual cultures. So you can translate into language, but are you still connecting with the person? So we'd certainly need to be guided by each community around what the particular meanings are and what's going to resonate with each community. I mean, we are doing some work at the moment with people with disability, and we're learning a lot there and how to try and make what we do accessible to people with disability. And we may think we have lots of the answers, but it's only when we talk to people who in the sector living with disability that we start to understand how far we've got to go in what we need to learn. So I'm going to throw that back to back to Judy and Jude, because you're much more able to tell us how to progress that. But it's something that Blue Knot is very keen to do, and very much wanting to invest. So whatever Rida can help us fundraise, and whatever we can contribute is something we want to invest in beginning to do that.
Certainly, the point of the entire fundraising for Blue Knot Foundation is to create resources for multicultural communities and survivors of complex trauma in the multicultural communities. So getting back to you, Judy, this is a tough one because, if you go to the health department, they might say, oh, we already have stuff translated in different languages. So then like, how do you make them understand, dude, like it may be translated in different languages, but that's not really how they may understand complex trauma. So what's your take on that?
I wish I had a magic wand and then just make it all happen. I'm gonna admit that it's still a work in progress. You know, we still have to advocate and push and get that information accessible, because that's what it is at the end of the day. Who cares if you translate it, like you just said? You know, we don't know whether audio might be more suitable. You know, you're talking about working across the lifespan, older adults. Hearing about it might be better. Cathy just mentioned people with disabilities. You know, do they, if they make a video, do they add captions to them? Are those subtitles translated? You know, there's so many things to consider, and the issue is it's in a lot of ways what's considered like the other groups, you know, the non-mainstream groups are a bit of an afterthought. So it's like, oh, well, now we need to translate resources. I've been talking about this to several other people, and so suddenly you need to find budget, you need to find money to do that. And what I'm advocating for and suggesting is that has to be at the beginning. You know, when you're doing a project proposal, when you're doing a strategic plan, those diversity needs to be included in your strategic plan and in your project budget. So where it's, you know, we have to have ensure that our materials are ready to be translated. We've got money to pay a translator. We have to ensure that, you know, the closed captions are there, ready to go. So I don't have an answer. I'm not happy about it. I mean, you asked me what my thoughts are. At the end of the day, I'm not happy. But that's, you know, that's what we do here as advocates and wonderful foundations and organizations such as what Jude has and Blue Knot Foundation to keep on pushing through. So hopefully we'll get there.
Thanks for that, Judy. That's exactly how I feel as well. I feel like we have like what 49% of Australians with one parent or themselves being born overseas, and then you don't have resources translated or available in different languages, or you don't have, when you make a call to a counseling service and they don't have counselors available in different languages. So that gets very difficult. Jude, like, has anyone ever approached you and said, oh, we can't find any translators? Because I feel like there's a whole lot of unemployed or underemployed migrant and refugee members of our community. And there's an employment opportunity here, especially post-COVID, where people have lost their jobs, but all these people can be trained to become interpreters and translators for a lot of health resources out there. So have you ever felt like it was ever hard to get translators, or you know, that there wasn't enough cooperation in terms of like organization collaborations regarding creating resources for multicultural communities?
Yeah, absolutely. As Judy mentioned, it's a work in progress. I also want to acknowledge the work that the VMC is doing in this in the aspect. I also want to acknowledge the work that the Ethnic Community Council of Victoria is doing. It's all about advocacy, and we will never stop. So we need to advocate. We need to be a voice for those people that don't have a voice, and that is how it comes into place. The reason you have a community consultation, of course, you have so many different community groups across Victoria. You know, when you attend the event, opportunity to collaborate, get connected with the leaders in those community, and always ask for volunteers. There are a lot of people that are out there, they have all those skills, but they haven't got the opportunity to actually do the work. So through there, you're able to get some few people that come out and say, okay, we have a language loop, organization that specialize in training people and this translator and all of those, so they can get themselves acquitted, they can get connected, get trained. We have more, so we can have more representative. As I mentioned, it's a work in progress, and I second that, Judy one. I believe we have also come a long way. There's a lot of work to be done on it. For instance, the COVID-19, we have seen a huge improvement in translation, that a lot of community now can say, okay, I can access this in my language. I can read this, I can do that. So there's a lot of improvement with COVID-19, and there are a lot of restructuring. I believe in the next few years we'll be having, more translator, more representation in terms of the community. As Judy mentioned, representation is very important. So during your strategic planning on the budget, it's important for the government to always put that into consideration and allocate the budget for it, because at the end of the day, we as a multicultural communities that make up, the country, that make up the community. So, and if some people can access information and others can access it, become extremely difficult. It's one thing again that people don't do. I think I would say they are right in their own way. That okay, you came here, now you are here, you have to learn, the culture, you have to acclimatize and all those things, assimilate, and it's still very important. But at the same time, we need to learn other people's culture as well. So because people can't speak English, it doesn't mean they are not intelligent. It doesn't mean they are not qualified. So let's not, base on assessment on all those things. They have a lot to contribute, even if they can speak English. So all we need, to build the economy or to build the community is a collaboration, a collaborative effort. And these people can bring their different skills, and their talent on board to build a compassionate community. And I think that is what we need.
Definitely, Jude. There is. I do agree that because we already have a COVID-19 multicultural model, which already translated resources for multicultural communities throughout the entire pandemic. Every update was then translated very quickly. So then you're like, oh wait, this is possible. So this can be done. And this can be done right by our peak bodies and national bodies of this country. And it also means we have enough people to translate things for others. You earlier mentioned about the diversity in Africa. Obviously, I mean, I don't know about Africa, but in South Asia, where I come from, every like 5 kilometer or 10 kilometer, a culture changes, a language change. But we got all those people here, right here. We don't need to go to like overseas to find them. We got people right here. And like I said earlier about the visual content, sometimes you don't need everything like written down, translated on paper. Like someone can like watch a visual. I found that with complex trauma, doing some kind of like an animation or statistics can like really help just understand, and I can rewind and rewatch it. So it's a little easier for me. And at the same time, yes, we have all the resources. So what I would love to see, in the next 5 years is like Blue Knot Foundation with its multilingual resources at every multicultural store in the country, and having a website where all these other organizations, multicultural, all health organizations coming together and starting to translate, because it shouldn't be up to one organization. It's not fair. If we combine our resources and efforts together, we're more likely to cover and reach a larger group in a very short period of time. Another great thing I see is that we have started to see resources in Aboriginal languages, which mean, and these were actually oral languages. So the language, because some of us come from cultures where the languages were never written. So to create written resources for oral languages, that's a new realm altogether, and that's something we can really work with. I am up to my final question, which is what message would you like to give everyone celebrating Cultural Diversity Week? And if you have any tips regarding healing, please do share with us. So I'll start with Cathy. Any message you have for our communities during Cultural Diversity Week, and any tips on healing?
Well, just to say that I think today's conversation has been a great start to achieving the vision that Rida just, articulated so well. And so I think, working together, it's not just not fair for organisations. None of us have the skills and the knowledge and the understanding. We all need to combine forces to make healing absolutely accessible and possible. And I suppose the tip I have is that, to hold on to the hope. And if you're not able to hold on to the hope yourself, hopefully someone around you can help you hold on to the hope, because there is hope of possibility and hope of change and hope of healing and recovery.
Oh, that's beautiful. Judy?
Thanks for that, Cathy. For me is in Cultural Diversity Week, but also after and before and every other time to share your story and to listen to other people's stories. That's the best way to connect and learn more, expand your world and expand other people's world. So nice and easy for me.
Perfect. Jude, what message do you have for Cultural Diversity Week and any strategies on healing?
Yeah, thank you, Katie and Judy, for that inspiration. I want to thank everyone who's celebrating the Cultural Diversity Week this month. And a great thanks to all those who put this fantastic opportunity. I would say a great opportunity for we to share our insight on this crucial and matter that is very, very important to me as well. So let us always remember that we are all unique. Even when people have different perspective or different opinion than our one, it doesn't mean that they are wrong. And we should try as much as possible not to pressurize people to actually, to succumb to our own idea. So it's very important for we to respect that. I also want to share that, this world is full of different people, different idea, different perspective. Let's respect one another, learn from one another, and just think about this. Doing good is the man's utmost task on earth. And the nature teaches us that when we do good to one person today, another person will do good to us in the future. That is the role of nature. And just think about that. How good would this world be if each and every one of us continue to do good to one another?
That is so beautiful, Jude. If you do good today, and then it will come back to you in another form. Thank you so much, all of you. Honestly, it's been amazing, and to Blue Knot Foundation for supporting me and doing this journey as Miss Diamond Australia International Finalist 2021 is really great. My final message is the essence of this conversation is what we call compassionate leadership. These two words. There's a lot of leaders out there in the community, but you're not a great leader if you don't have compassion. And therefore, when you have charity pageants out in the community celebrating diversity, regardless of your shape and sizes, overlooking any stereotyping from and very rigid beauty standards, having a charity pageant actually raising awareness of social problems and community issues and actually raising funds to overcome those is I think is a great opportunity for girls and boys out there. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope that you do donate to the Blue Knot Foundation. There's a Shaft link that will be available for people to donate, and please give us a like on the page on Facebook, Blue Knot Foundation. It's Blue Knot with KNOT, not. And so, and also give a like to Jimha to support Jude, and give a like to Victorian Multicultural Commission. So we're all, seeing the collaboration together. Thank you so much for joining us today. Signing off now. Thank you.
Thanks so much.